Now, guys, have a seat. We're going to preach tonight. You can get cozy, relax. We're in the middle of a series at the moment called Made for the Human Race. And I'm excited to preach tonight, and hopefully people feel refreshed or they get a new insight on what God really thinks about them or how He's going to use us in such a time as this. And one of our talking points here at Hard House is that you don't have to believe to belong. We believe that people that will find belonging will then have a journey to find God in that process. And so if you're watching online, we just want to appreciate those that are tuning and taking some time out of your day just to be with us. We appreciate you just as much as being in the room. We believe that the gospel can go to all corners of the world. So we just want to thank you for joining in and being a part of what we're doing here. But I'm going to be reading out of Luke 19:1. Very famous story for those that know God. I'm going to try and preach to both demographics tonight, those that don't know God, those that do know God. And just hopefully you can get some insight or revelation from this. But it's a famous story about Jesus running into a guy that wasn't really thought much of, and he was just kind of a dude doing his thing. And Jesus comes along, and this story unfolds. And I think it's amazing because this whole concept, this whole series we're in, is about how God wants to transform the human race. He wants to make a difference in your life. He wants to make a difference in the people's lives around you. And it's more than just us showing up and surviving, but it's about us having a relationship with Jesus and thriving. And so tonight I'm going to preach this passage. And it says in Luke 1, if you have your notes or whatever you're following with, or if you're online, it will come up on the screens. But it says here, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. And number 2, verse 2, it says here, a man there by the name of Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector and was very wealthy. Now, I love how the Bible gets into detail about the characters we're preaching about. It wasn't just a guy that was just searching for Jesus, but he was known as being wealthy and a tax collector. Now, if you've been following along with what we do here in our series, we've learned here at Hard House that whenever the Bible references the word sinners, it taps on tax collectors after. It's like they were their own little bubble, sinners and tax collectors. And we all agreed that still to this day, tax collectors are sinners. And so it's like this whole concept that the Bible made it very clear, he's a tax collector, dirty tax collectors. And this was a wealthy tax collector. But in verse 3, he says here that he wanted to see who Jesus was. But because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. Now, I can't relate to that because I'm quite tall myself. But shout out to all the short kings in the room. You guys are awesome. So he ran ahead and he climbs the sycamore tree and he sees him. Since Jesus was coming that way, when Jesus reached the spot and looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. Like, I love this part here. It's like a guy that's just, the Bible's describing as like a sinner, tax collector. And he's looking to see who Jesus was all about, what's going on with the whole thing. He's searching, he's wondering, and so he finds a way. And then when Jesus gets to the spot, finally reaches the spot where Zach was sitting, he gets excited. And I know this by the wording he uses here is he come down immediately, not come down later when you get a breath or I'll come back and check up on you in a minute. He's like, come down immediately. I've got to hang out with you today. And so in verse 6, it says here, he came down, and once he came down, he welcomed him gladly. And we're trying to explore how Jesus can, and God in this whole made for the human race concept, that he can take average people, take everyday people like ourselves and find us in wherever we are and use us for something or to start to create a story in our lives. And so this is my first point I wanted to preach to someone tonight. And if you're a believer, I believe this is for you too. And this is for maybe people that don't believe or they're discovering what Jesus is all about. But God doesn't use you based on who you are. God will use you based on where you are. Zach was the tax collector. He's the who you are. This is how they know him. This is who they know him as. But when he finds himself in the vision of Jesus, looking for Jesus looking for him, God starts to use the where he is and not the who he is. And you might not feel important tonight. I know that in my journey of trying to discover like God's purpose in my life. It seems to be a thing that people struggle with quite often. Is sometimes I say to myself, am I even important enough for God to use? Like, could God really use me? Because I'm very unqualified. I'm not the most qualified person in the room. Could God really use me? I don't know if someone's relating this tonight. You might be feeling this. You might be like, well, I feel like I'm unworthy. Like, how could God ever use me in my brokenness, in my place? You know, this is a good one. I'm really good at this one here. Some of us could go, how could God use it? Because I'm just faking it until I make it. And so this starts to warp our perception of how God will use people. Because we are telling the truth. We are broken, and we are tax collectors, and we are sinners, and we are sick, and we are stuffed. But God uses the where we are over the who we are. He will take the who you are and help you change your life because of where you are. And I was like struggling with this concept, and I was thinking about how we unpack this for part 3 tonight. And I was thinking about the heaviness of the culture we currently live in. Because it's like in those times, it's like, you know, people knew who you were, the reputation's there. It's like his identity was tax collector. And I'm like, in this day and age, how many of us live in that comparison spirit? You know, social media is like magnified. I know that even in my life, I can be having a somewhat day, and then I hop on Instagram and someone's having that better day. And so I compare to the who they are. You know, I feel like in our culture, it hurts us, it cripples us in every corner. And it's not just, please, I hope you hear my heart tonight. It's not just those that are looking for God. I believe those that have found God still struggle with this. They struggle with the comparison culture. We're in it. Like it comes down to the clothes you wear, the car you drive. It's when the kids were yelling and you hop on Instagram and Susie Jones posted a photo of her kids just doing A grades at school. And we get wrapped up in the who we are.
Yeah, this is good, babe.
God could never use the who we are. But God's looking for the where we are. Where we are. You know, God, I've said this and I've noticed, and this is maybe for the believers tonight that have heard this before, but you'll say things like, God will only use me if I'm doing already. God could only use me if I already believe. I want you to think about this one for a second. I've come across people my whole life, and they say, well, God love me if I believe in him. I'm like, he already loves you.
Yeah, come on.
But do I have to believe in him? No.
Yeah.
And they try to wrap their head around this, and then some of us are like, well, then God can only use me if I have the title. If I'm in a position. God will only use me if I can prove that I'm useful. But these are all who you are qualities. God's after the where you are. And I'll tell you why this is important, because you might have never heard the gospel before, and this is for maybe someone online right now. And you think there is no way that my life could equal to anything. That my life could be used for anything. That what I've done, what I've seen, what I'm involved in could work out. But Zach's starting to prove this not to be true. God's not put off by the who you are. He's super excited to meet you where you are. That means you can come in here today exactly where you are. Broken marriage. Might have had very dirty thoughts before you even heard the sermon. You might have addiction you're battling with right now, whatever it is. And God still gets excited with the where you are. Like the fact that you are like, I'm going to look even though I don't believe. I'm going to chase even though I haven't seen. I'm going to find more for my life even though I have no proof, makes him excited. And I love this because, and I just wanted to chuck this cheeky one in there, it was actually Zacharias' heart that sent him off the tree, not his ability to climb. He's not like, I'm a good climber, I'm going to get up the tree so Jesus can see me. He's like, there's something about this and there's something going on. And I'm going to do what it takes to get in the pursuit of him. And I wanted to say this to anyone that either knows God or you don't know God. If you don't know God, all you have to do is pursue Him and He will use you the way you are. And for some of you, you believe in God. And we've settled a little bit. We're not willing to push through the crowds anymore. We're not willing to climb the tree. It's too much effort. But God's looking for the next part of your life. And I want to encourage anyone tonight that can hear my voice, so you're online and you're not a non-believer or you don't understand what this is all about. If you haven't found Jesus yet, can I encourage you to keep looking? If you struggle with who you are, God will still use that. And if you feel like the creator of the universe could never connect with you, trust me tonight, here at Heart House, we believe He's already on His way. Oh, there's no way. You know that marvelous, magical, amazing, blessed God they always talk about? There's no way He would stop for me. We believe He's already on His way. And so the verse continues. It starts to unfold. There's a story happening here. And I find this really interesting. In verse 7, it says here, and the people saw this and they began to mutter. They're like, oh, what's going on here? He has gone to be a guest of a sinner. Now, I was reading this week and I'm like, this is so funny to me because like, in what part of life did they think they were not sinners? Like, we must have good teaching in this generation because most people I talk to be like, yeah, I'm a sinner. And these guys are like, he's going to hang out with a sinner. Like, they're not sinners. And I got to be careful of this because we promote this here at our church for the faith families visiting us. We promote this, that without being a sinner, you can't have a savior. So you can't just be like, well, look at them and look what they've done from a distance. God's come to save the world, come back for everyone. And I found it interesting that they're muttering and going, well, he's going to hang out with that guy. But in this process in verse 8, Zacharias stood up and it said here, he said, Lord, look. Like, I know that you've come across here and I was just looking, I was just interested, but here I am, I've turned up and it says here, Lord, look, here and now. I'll give half my possessions away to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount. You know, I love this because we're talking about made for the human race. And how people are trying to discover whether they're chosen, whether they are useful, whether they're just here to exist or there's more to this whole thing. And in this passage, it's starting to highlight that, and I love it because it shows here that he was chosen and then he began to change. Like, I love how Jesus wasn't like, hey, I can see you in the tree there, dude. And I know you're about to change. I know it's going to be a moment of changing. So can you go do these few things? And I'm going to turn up to your house. And Zach's like, sure, man. Just give me the list. I'll go sort it out. And Jesus says, hey, you're chosen.
Yes. Come on. Thank God.
And through being chosen, he began to change. You know, someone needs to hear this tonight. You might not feel that God could ever choose you. But you're already chosen before you change. And some people are afraid to walk into churches. They're afraid to walk into hearing the gospel. They're afraid of hearing the good news because they think that they have to change before they can be chosen. The gospel we preach and the gospel we believe is that you are already chosen, and believe through being chosen you will change in that amazing grace of God. Which, you know, leads me on to this funny phenomenon that happens. I've experienced this myself. This is not me preaching to you tonight. This is me preaching to us as a collective. This is me feeling this. And I just wanted to say this. I love how they're like, that's the sinner, that's the loser. They're muttering, they're pointing, and he has this somewhat reputation. And the crazy thing about this is that they're not lying. Like, they're not making up stuff. He is that dude. Not like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It's not fair. No, he was that guy. And so my second point tonight is, what's happened to you might have harmed you, but it hasn't hindered you. I love how they highlight that he's this person. And you might go, well, that's cool. I get that. Stuff's happened. Like, I'm believing we're all human in here. No one's from outer space tonight. All of us have done stuff that's harmed us. We've all thought stuff that's harmed us. We've all been harmed and we've all been hurt, and we've either put that hurt on ourselves, on our own kids, on our marriage, on any aspect of our life. We've all harmed someone in some capacity. No one's escaped from that. It's not some people who just had a home run life. We've all harmed. But this is the fascinating thing about Jesus. What's happened to you might have harmed you, but it hasn't hindered you from what he will do in your life. You know, I was led to think when I was a bit younger that the stuff that had happened to me or the stuff that I had done would hinder my future with God. I don't know if anyone's relating to me tonight. Anyone feels this. Whether you believe or you don't, or you're just trying to figure this out, there's this tug of war that goes on where we love going to churches where like everyone can do stuff, everyone's chosen, everyone's going to change the world. And then we sit there with the real us. And we know the harm. And we know the damage. And we know the hurt. And we know what we carried in. We know what we got. And so we start to form this reality that, well, it's going to hinder what God's got for my life. That I know the pastor's shouting this and he's preaching this, that God's got a life for me, but really, he doesn't know the real me. He doesn't know what I'm really thinking. He doesn't know what I'm really hurting. And I just want to say this tonight. Just because you might have harmed yourself or you're hurting yourself or you've done something has not hindered you from the calling and the purpose of God on your life. And I'll admit this. Yes, the reputation is bad. He had a bad reputation. And yours might be bad too. And yes, the sin hurts. And yes, we have done mistakes and we've done things to harm others. And yes, we have bad thoughts. Some of us might have even had them while we came here, or we're having them while we are here. Yes, some of us are still battling with the hidden addiction. Yes, some of us are struggling to survive at times. And yes, some of us carry emotional and mental illness that takes a toll. And those things start to tell us that what God's got for us has absolutely hindered us and we cannot be used for anything. I want to say right now, that is a lie from the enemy. Just because you have been harmed or hurt, God will not stop what's got for your life. He won't hinder what's got for your life. He's calling you into something. And so yes, these things are true. We're not trying to hide that here at Heart House. We're all sinners. We've all fallen short. We've all made a mistake. But yes, by God's grace, it hasn't hindered us. In fact, God just takes it one step further. He's a one step further kind of God. You ever thought about, we're talking about this story of a guy that was just broken and he is what he is. And then he gets down and he has this revelation. And Jesus is like, hey, let's go hang out. And he's like, well, I'm going to pay 4 times back what I owed. I kind of laugh at this because, like, he wouldn't be able to do that unless he ripped him off. Like, if he was an honest tax collector, one-fold. But because he was blessed by his sin in some weird way in the scriptures, he's like, I'm a 4-fold. And I find it funny. I'm like looking at this, I'm like, man, his past is giving him an upper hand in his present. Because the wrong he did, God used to make right. And for you right now, you might be struggling with these things and you might have these burdens and you might have those things. But in some weird way, God will use what was intended to destroy your life to give you purpose. There is people in this room right now, you are struggling with addiction. When you process that and when you work through that, or you're currently working through that, you will help other people work through their addiction and their pain and their hurt. Some people in here are on their second marriage. And guess what? You're going to help people that are struggling with their first. God will use the old and the broken to use it for new and to help people. It hasn't hindered you. It actually turns into helping you. He's pretty smart. And I think about this, I'm like, everyone's like, oh, good on him, he paid 4 back. I'm like, yeah, because he ripped him off 4 times. God will never hinder the plans for your life just because of what you've done. In fact, He'll take what you're currently in or what you're currently working through, and He'll somehow turn that into purpose and helping other people and fixing it or making it right. It's a weird relationship with God, taking the broken to fix things. And so the story starts to come to an end. Jesus is like, woohoo. That's not in the Bible. I made that up. But the guys can edit that in down the bottom. Today, salvation has come to the house. And I love this line here because this man too is a son of Abraham. And I read that today. I'm like, why did Jesus have to say that? It's like he had to convince the rest of them, oh, by the way, he's also a son. You know, one of the craziest things I think about when I talk about, trying to reach the lost or even trying to help the found is that we struggle to think that before we're anything, before we're leaders, before we're pastors, before we're perfect, before we try to chase being saved or anything, we're sons and daughters first. And Jesus comes in, he's like, yeah, cool, tax collector, paying back double, that's 4 times, that's all that. But don't forget, guys, he was just a son. In verse 10, he wraps it up by saying, For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. I feel like the lost part of a believer's journey is a work in progress. There's some days where I feel like I'm found and I feel like God's presence is around me and I feel like He's there. And then some days I feel like He's not. And so how you feel, and if you feel lost, I just want to encourage you that God's still there. You're still a son. You're still a daughter. He still cares. He still has something for you. He still wants something for you. He's still willing to do something. But if we're going to wrap up this part of the Made for the Human Race, there is a two-way street. And my third point tonight is you can't find what you're not looking for. Now, people say to me all the time, I want hope. I'm like, come to our church. They're like, no, I won't find it there. They say, I'm looking for real peace. I'm like, can I tell you something? No, I don't want to listen. And I love this concept because if we understand this verse and this story, the verse starts off with Zacchaeus seeking Jesus. Like you know this, you know the story. I just read it out to you. He's seeking Jesus. He's looking for Jesus. But in verse 10, it clearly highlights that Jesus wraps this whole thing up and says, well, actually, I was seeking you. It's this partnership. And I think before we go into the purposes of God and how God's going to use the human race and He's going to change all this, you have to first realize you are a son and daughter first. I love how Zach, he got painted as this dirty, which he was, don't get me wrong, we read it. But the reality was he was just a son. And Jesus reestablishes, he's like, hey, guys, he's a son like us. Come on. I don't know if you're a believer tonight, you believe this or you don't believe it, or you've been in church your whole life. You're still, firstly, son or daughter. That's the most important part of following Christ. The beautiful thing about God is that He's not a dictatorship, but it's a partnership. And He wants to do life with you. He's not above you and He's not beyond you. He wants to be with you. And this is some concept that's been warped in believers around the world. Maybe, I don't know what it is. It's like Jesus is some hierarchy, high God that's so far to reach, and we thirst for His attention and we need to earn His ability to love us. But the reality is you were His son before you were anything else. You were His daughter before you were anything else. And so the true story is a father looking for his children, and in return, a child looking for a father. You know, I can relate to this. I've just mistakenly brought in a third child into this world. We'll cut that out. Did Pastor Sam really say that? Yeah, I said that. You come over to my house this week, you would have realized. You're lucky Faith Family was coming tonight. I wasn't going to do church. I was like, Go watch the footy. And it's not the new one. It's the one on eBay. So, but I'm like adjusting this whole thing. I'm like trying to learn it. I'm like, father, kids. Some of them are really naughty. All of them are really naughty. And so I'm like, it's like the first time ever we're being outnumbered. Because like, usually it's just like, Kirsty, you take one, I'll take one. And we have a fairly non-stressful life. But we are stressed right now. Like, we're going to come visit Faith Family next week. Yeah. And so I'm trying to distract him. I'm like trying to do things. I'm like, Kirst, I'm going to take a risk. I'm a gambling man. I shouldn't say that. I am a gambling man. I took the kids to the shops by myself. And so I'm like, I'm going to do something. And for those who don't know, we adopted a rabbit we stole a rabbit. And we're trying to, they were looking for that this week, you know. They knocked on the door. They're like, have you seen Oreo? And I was like, Mudcake? Which is the new rabbit's name. But anyway, you need to cut that out, tape 2, in case they watch it. I'm just a son. But I'm like, Kirst, I'm going to distract him. So I'm like, all right, kids, get in the car. We're going to Bunnings. The Bunnings is the most safest place, right? It's just like open and there's heaps the kids to look at. And I take them to Bunnings. We're going to build a rabbit fence. We're going to do this project and we start to, get fencing. And I, to be honest, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going in there blind. And I always look for like someone that also doesn't know what they're doing so I don't feel so bad. Like if I go up to like one of the OGs at Bunnings and I start explaining my problems, they're like, who raised you? I'm like, so I just find someone that's like new and I'm like, hey, do you know how to build a fence? I don't. And so we just talk about, and there was this lady that was in this aisle and I went up to her and I'm like, hey, I need help. And I had the 2 boys in the trolley, they're behind me, they're sitting there, they're safe and they're secure. And I'm talking to this lady and she's like, yep, you do this, this, and this. And I'm like, thank you, great, I'm gonna go do that. And I turn around and in the trolley is just Dallas. For those who don't know, Dallas is my 5-year-old, Blaze is my 3-year-old, and Rocky wasn't on the scene. So Blaze was missing. And I said to Dallas, I turned around, I'm like, Dallas, where's your brother? And he's like, I said, Dallas, please, I'm a little bit panicking right now. Where's your brother? And he's like, yo, real brothers don't snitch. Like, holding it down for Blaze. And I was like, no, I'm actually really stressed right now. Where is your brother? Because, we're part of a community of church people, so sometimes people just take your kids out of the trolley. And you're like, oh, hey, it's our kids leader, got our kids. But people just take your kids sometimes. And I'm like, did someone take him from church? And Dallas was like, mm-mm. I said, Dallas, just tell me, please, and I'll give you lollies. And he's like, all right. So while you were talking, Blaze hopped out of the trolley and left. And I was like, okay. And then I just started sweating. And I'm like, I got to find this guy real quick. Bunnings is huge. And I'm like, where do I go? I'm going up the aisles. I'm going like everywhere and I cannot find this kid anywhere. I'm like looking for him everywhere. And I'm like, Dallas, I'm panicking. Just help me. And right down in the trade section where like the cars drive is this lady in a Bunnings uniform. She's got Blaze on her shoulder and Blaze is like raising his hands and dancing and she's like carrying this and she's like looking around. And there was like a chain of people at each aisle like just down there. And they're like passing me and directing me on. And I see him and I'm like, oh. She's like, is this yours? I'm like, nope. Just kept walking. But I see him, I'm like, and I don't know if anyone knows Blaze, but you're about to find out who he is. I'm like, Blaze, what are you doing? She's like, you got to watch out. There's like cars and stuff and like you should know better. I'm like, yeah, I know, I usually do, but we had a 3rd kid, so we're dumb. And so she passes him to me and he stands on the ground and I go to lightly grab his hand to say, we're going now. And I kid you not, I slightly touched him. And he goes, Dad, don't hurt me. And threw himself to the ground. And I'm like, definitely not my kid. He's like, Dad, don't hurt me. You're hurting me, Dad. Is any parent that's ever had... Kids are so much smarter than us. Yeah. And you know what's crazy? The non-parents are like, he hurt him. Call the cops. Like, I'm like, no. Kids, they think if a kid's just said that, it's like real. And I'm like, they lie all the time. And he's like, my back. And like, he's on the ground. I'm like, no. It's like, I'm like just checking if anyone from the community knows, like, because, we got like, we're pastors and Christians and stuff, so I'm like, we're going to aisle 3, you're going to find out, child. And so I pick him up. I wanted to leave him there, and we get to the car, and this is Blaze. Anyone knows Blaze? And Blaze goes, haha, funny, Dad, right? Fully laughing. And I said, I'll show you what funny is when we get home to your mother. But in the drive home, I just figured out that maybe we shouldn't tell Mum about this, so I'm sorry you're hearing this for the first time. No, we told her, we confessed. And Dallas was like, it was all Blaze. I'm like, oh, now you want to talk. But I get home and we're safe, and I didn't feel like building the fence for him. I felt like letting the rabbit go. And I think about, like, with this whole made for the human race, and how we're children and we're lost, and we do things and we go places, and sometimes we even react the wrong way when God's showing up. But you can't find what you're not looking for. And you need to know tonight that God's looking for you, even if you aren't serving, even if you haven't found purpose, even if you haven't, given this whole following Christ thing a full-time go, even if you're just trying to, figure out where you are in the church or how you're going to do this for God, or if God even loves you. Before all that, He is looking for you. And I didn't go home and say, well, cursed, we lost Blaze, I didn't look for him, I went home. The urgency on my heart, the urgency on my soul, the urgency on me was like, even though I want to kill him, I could never forsake him. I could never leave him. So as the band comes, I just want to maybe ask, you can ask this rhetorical question to yourself. It's like, you've clarified the human race. God wants to transform the human race. He wants to transform your life. He wants to transform your marriage. He wants to transform your kids. He wants to transform every aspect of your life. And we've established that He's on His way. And we're established that He's looking for you. But can I say tonight, are you looking for Him? Because you cannot find what you're not looking for. There's people that might have followed God their whole lives, and they understand purpose and concept and chosen, and you've heard this preached probably a million times. But can I encourage you that in your walk that you don't grow cold to looking for Him, to seeking Him, to know that He's looking for you already, but to re-engage and to go, you know what? I'm going to find Dad because I know that Dad's looking for me. And something in that, like I said, it's not a dictatorship, it's a partnership. And through that, He will take the where you are. He doesn't care about the who you are. He doesn't care about what you've done, what you're doing, what you're currently missing. But He will take the where you are, the heart that's after Him. And He will use that to transform the human race. And I'm not even talking about typical Pentecostal preaching where it's like your schools and we're going to change the world. I'm talking about just your intimate family. Just that one brother that doesn't believe in God, or that one person in your family that you wish would come to church. Just that one. That's the human race. That's who you're trying to reach. That's just, and if you go to God and you call on Him, you run to the Father, He will use your mess to reach them. I pray for myself that if I do this for the next 30 years, I will never forget that I'm a son first. Before the politics, and before the antics, and before the wonderful things that come with following Christ. Some of the people in this room now that have followed Christ more than 10 years know what I'm talking about. That we remind ourselves that we were a daughter and a son first, and there we remain as He uses us. And for those that didn't know tonight, and as I close, you can stand with me. You might think, I've got to get this right before I do this Jesus thing. But Jesus is just waiting for you to get to the right spot. Maybe it's just turning up to church, or maybe just watching online, or sending this message to someone, or whatever it is. But it's not about the who you are. It's about the where you are, and He will use that. And so tonight you need to know this, that whether you believe or you don't, whether you've found Jesus or you're still trying to figure out if it's real, that He loves you unconditionally, and He's got a plan for you, and He's got a purpose for you, and He's not put off by who you are. He will definitely use you in ways that you could not imagine. No one's disqualified. No one's too broken. No one's too gone. No one's too far for God to find and reach. Amen. Love you, church. Let's worship. Let's see what He can do in this next one.